Hi, my name is Michael Parrott and I am in CS1C with Joe Getz in Florence Moore Home. Today I'm going to talk about computers and go a little bit more in depth than we did in class. So a computer is made of several different components including RAM, motherboard, a graphics card, a hard disk drive, a processor, and a wireless card. RAM is random access memory and is used by the computer to store temporary information that will not persist after the computer is shut off. And it's a lot quicker than using the hard disk drive, and it speeds up the computer's action. The motherboard is basically the relay for all of these systems to interact. So the motherboard is connected to this processor, the motherboard is connected to the graphics card, and it connects them on, controls all these signals throughout. The graphics card takes the load off of this processor unit and processes all the signals that have to do with the graphics so that the CPU, instead of having to handle the graphics, can handle all the computing intensive tasks. The hard disk drive stores all the information permanently, so while the computer is off, that information doesn't get deleted. It doesn't need power to maintain that information. The processor is basically the brain of the computer, so that's where all the power comes from. Processors come in many different forms. They can have more than one core. And what it comes down to is that a computer, the processor operates on machine code. The operating system runs on the processor and controls the inputs and outputs and handles all the data management and user management for the processor. Any programs that you run or things that you do on the computer are run through a compiler in the operating system so that that signal can be processed and operated on by the processor. So the processor works in terms of ones and zeros, and everything that you work in is numbers and letters and mouse movements, and that's all converted into the machine code which is used by the processor. When a computer first turns on, it has to run the POST, which is the power on self-test, and it checks the CPU, the memory, and the BIOS and makes sure that all the hardware is in check, and if it is, then it accesses the hard disk drives and runs the operating system so that you can actually use the computer. And the last interesting fact is that computers cannot do more than one thing at once, but they seem to do more than one thing at once by switching in between tasks thousands of times per second. And that way, even to you, it may seem like everything is running simultaneously, but the computer is actually handling task by task. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about is the processor cache, which is being implemented now in many processors. And what it does is stores information that is commonly used by the CPU so that when you access these things that you commonly use, it can go directly from the cache instead of having to get the information and then display it for you. You can get it directly from its memory.